In the Bible, there were many great leaders and prophets, but few had the impact of the biblical figure Moses. Born into a world of slavery and oppression, Moses rose to become a great reformer. But how did he become such a significant figure? What challenges did he face, and what can we learn from his life? This video will explore Moses' life and the lessons we can draw from his remarkable journey. To understand Moses' story, we must first revisit the history of the Israelites in Egypt. The book of Genesis records that a great famine struck the land, and God used a Hebrew man named Joseph, who had been sold into slavery by his brothers, to save Egypt. As a result, the Israelites settled in Egypt, where they were initially welcomed and treated with respect out of gratitude for Joseph's contributions. However, after Joseph's death, the situation for the Hebrews in Egypt began to change. God made Abraham's descendants numerous, and the Hebrew population in Egypt grew rapidly. As their numbers and influence increased, a new pharaoh, who knew nothing of Joseph's legacy, became concerned. Fearing that the growing Israelite population might one day threaten Egypt, he subjected the Hebrews to harsh slavery, forcing them to endure degrading and arduous labor. Despite these conditions, the Israelites continued to multiply, just as God had promised Abraham. In an attempt to curb their growth, Pharaoh ordered the midwives of the Hebrews to kill any male infants at birth. However, the midwives defied his orders, claiming that the Hebrew women were so vigorous that their babies were born before they could arrive. Enraged, Pharaoh decreed that every newborn Hebrew male be thrown into the Nile, sparing only the females. This edict spread terror among the Israelites as mothers witnessed their babies being snatched from them and killed. One woman from the tribe of Levi, desperate to save her son, managed to hide him for 3 months. When it became too difficult to keep him concealed, she placed the baby in a basket, covered him with a seagrass blanket, and set him adrift on the Nile, praying for God's mercy and protection. God heard her prayers, guiding the basket to the riverbank where Pharaoh's daughter was bathing. She found the beautiful baby boy, recognized him as a Hebrew, yet chose to adopt him, naming him Moses. Moses grew up among Egyptian nobility, enjoying a life of luxury and privilege. Yet, despite his comfortable upbringing, he felt a deep connection to his roots. As an adult, he could no longer ignore the plight of the Hebrews. In Exodus chapter 2, it is written that Moses witnessed an Egyptian soldier brutally assaulting a fellow Jew. Overcome with anger, Moses struck the soldier, killing him. The news of the crime spread quickly, reaching Pharaoh, who ordered Moses' arrest. Forced to flee, Moses escaped into the desert. During his flight, Moses encountered a group of women attempting to water their flock, only to be harassed by shepherds. Moses intervened, helping the women draw water for their animals. Grateful, they invited Moses to their home and introduced him to their father. In appreciation, the father invited Moses to stay with them, eventually offering him one of his daughters, Zipporah, in marriage. Moses settled in the land of Midian, where he and Zipporah had a son and lived peacefully. While Moses was building a new life, the Israelites continued to suffer under the oppression of a new Pharaoh, who was even harsher than his predecessors. The people of God cried out for deliverance, and the Lord answered their prayers. God appeared to Moses in the form of a burning bush on Mount Horeb, where he was tending his flock. Moses noticed that the bush was engulfed in flames, yet it was not consumed. Intrigued, he approached the bush and heard the voice of the Lord. God declared that he had heard the cries of his people and had come to deliver them, choosing Moses as his instrument. Initially, Moses was reluctant to accept this mission, seeing himself as an ordinary man unfit to lead an entire nation out of slavery. But God demonstrated his power, turning Moses' staff into a serpent and then back into a staff. This miracle convinced Moses that God was with him. However, Moses still doubted his ability, especially due to his speech impediment. God reassured Moses, promising that he would always be with him, and appointed Moses' brother Aaron as his spokesman. With God's assurance, Moses and Aaron returned to Egypt and persuaded the Israelites to accept Moses as their divinely appointed liberator. However, convincing Pharaoh proved much more difficult. When Moses and Aaron confronted Pharaoh, demanding that he let the Israelites go, Pharaoh refused, even when Moses turned his staff into a serpent. In response, Pharaoh's priests performed the same feat using dark magic, but Moses' serpent swallowed their serpents, a sign that God's power was supreme. Despite this, Pharaoh hardened his heart, and the Israelites' suffering intensified. God instructed Moses to continue demanding the release of his people, knowing that Pharaoh would remain obstinate. As Pharaoh continued to refuse, God unleashed a series of plagues on Egypt, later known as the 10 plagues. These plagues included turning the Nile's water into blood, infestations of frogs, lice and flies, disease among livestock, painful boils, devastating hail and fire, swarms of locusts, darkness, and finally, the death of the firstborn sons of Egypt. The Bible records that the Israelites had been enslaved in Egypt for 400 years by the time of Moses. Despite the severity of the plagues, Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, and he refused to release the Israelites. But God was with Moses and Aaron, and they were his chosen instruments to fulfill the promises he had made to Abraham and his descendants. Finally, after the devastating 10th plague, in which the firstborn sons of Egypt were killed, including Pharaoh's own son, Pharaoh relented. He ordered Moses and the Israelites to leave Egypt immediately. After 430 years of slavery, the Israelites were free. Under God's guidance and Moses' leadership, they began their journey to the land promised to their ancestors. As the Israelites fled, Pharaoh's heart once again hardened, and he pursued them with his army. Trapped between the advancing Egyptians and the Red Sea, the Israelites despaired, some even suggesting they return to slavery in Egypt. But Moses assured them that God was still with them. At God's command, Moses raised his staff over the Red Sea, and the waters parted, allowing the Israelites to cross on dry land. When Pharaoh's army attempted to follow, the waters closed, drowning the Egyptian soldiers and securing the Israelites' freedom. As they journeyed through the desert, the Israelites faced many challenges. They grew hungry and thirsty, often grumbling against Moses and God. But God provided for them, sending manna from heaven and quail to eat, and bringing forth water from a rock. Despite their doubts, God remained faithful to his promises, leading them to Mount Sinai, where he gave Moses the 10 Commandments, a code of conduct for the Israelites. However, while Moses was on the mountain for 40 days, the Israelites grew impatient and made a golden calf to worship, turning away from God. When Moses descended from the mountain and saw their idolatry, he was furious. He destroyed the tablets and the idol, and those who had led the people astray were punished. Moses returned to the mountain, and God gave him a new set of tablets. These tablets were placed in the Ark of the Covenant, a sacred chest that would accompany the Israelites on their journey. The Israelites spent 40 years wandering in the wilderness, a period marked by their lack of faith and obedience. Although they were initially meant to enter the Promised Land soon after leaving Egypt, their fear and disobedience led to God's judgment. He decreed that the generation that had left Egypt would not enter the Promised Land, leaving that inheritance to their children. Moses was 120 years old when he died, and God buried him in an unknown grave. Because of his disobedience at the waters of Meribah, Moses was not permitted to lead the Israelites into the Promised Land. Yet, despite his flaws, Moses was a faithful servant of God, and his life serves as an enduring example of redemption and God's faithfulness. In the story of Moses, the roles of his siblings, Miriam and Aaron, are often overlooked. Both were instrumental in helping Moses lead the Israelites. Miriam watched over baby Moses in the basket and later prophesied about him, while Aaron spoke on Moses' behalf and became the first high priest of Israel. Their contributions highlight how God can use an entire family to fulfill his purposes. Moses' life is a powerful testament to God's faithfulness. Despite his humble beginnings as a baby in a basket, God used Moses to deliver the Israelites from slavery and lead them out of Egypt. Moses faced numerous challenges, including rebellions and the stubbornness of the people, but God was with him every step of the way. His story continues to inspire us all. The life of Moses, as recounted in the Bible, offers rich lessons that continue to resonate across generations. His journey from a Hebrew baby hidden in the reeds to a leader who delivered his people from slavery is a profound narrative of faith, perseverance, and divine guidance. By reflecting on Moses' experiences, we can draw valuable insights into leadership, trust in divine providence, humility, and the importance of obedience to a higher purpose. Leadership and responsibility. One of the most significant lessons from Moses' life is the nature of true leadership. Despite his initial reluctance, Moses rose to the occasion when called upon by God to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. This underscores that leadership is often thrust upon those who may not feel ready or equipped, but who possess the qualities needed to fulfill their roles. Moses was initially hesitant, citing his lack of eloquence and self-confidence. However, God assured him that his weaknesses would not impede the mission. This teaches us that leadership is less about personal ability and more about a willingness to serve and depend on a higher power for strength. Moses also demonstrates that leadership comes with great responsibility. He was tasked with guiding an entire nation through the desert, dealing with constant complaints, rebellions, and challenges. His patience and perseverance in the face of these difficulties remind us that true leaders must be steadfast, patient, and committed to their mission, even when the road is arduous. Leadership is not just about directing others. It is about serving them, bearing their burdens, and guiding them toward a common goal. Trust in divine providence. Moses' life is a powerful testament to the importance of trusting in divine providence. Time and again, Moses faced situations that seemed impossible to overcome, from confronting Pharaoh, the most powerful ruler of the time, to leading his people through the Red Sea and sustaining them in the barren wilderness. In each of these instances, Moses relied not on his strength, but on God's power and promises. His unwavering faith in God's plan, even when the path ahead seemed unclear or impossible, serves as a model for us today. This trust was most evident when Moses stood at the edge of the Red Sea, with the Egyptian army closing in behind him and no visible way forward. Instead of succumbing to fear, he followed God's command to raise his staff, parting the waters and allowing the Israelites to cross on dry ground. This miraculous event teaches us that when we face seemingly insurmountable challenges, trusting in a higher power can lead to solutions beyond our comprehension. It also shows that faith often requires taking bold steps into the unknown, confident that divine guidance will lead us through. Humility and obedience. Another critical lesson from Moses' life is the importance of humility and obedience. Despite his privileged upbringing in Pharaoh's palace, Moses did not consider himself superior to his fellow Israelites. He remained humble, recognizing that his role as leader was not a position of personal glory, but of service to God and his people. This humility was evident when he repeatedly interceded on behalf of the Israelites, pleading with God to spare them despite their frequent disobedience and complaints. Moses' obedience to God's commands, even when they seemed daunting or incomprehensible, is another key aspect of his character. He followed God's instructions precisely, whether it was confronting Pharaoh with the 10 plagues, leading the Israelites through the wilderness, or delivering the 10 commandments. However, the story also reminds us of the consequences of disobedience. When Moses struck the rock at Meribah instead of speaking to it as God had commanded, he demonstrated a momentary lapse in faith and obedience. As a result, he was not permitted to enter the Promised Land. This episode highlights that obedience to divine commands is crucial, and even leaders are not exempt from the consequences of their actions. The role of family and community support Moses' journey was not one he undertook alone. The support he received from his siblings, Miriam and Aaron, played a crucial role in his leadership. Miriam watched over him as a baby and later led the women of Israel in worship, Aaron served as his spokesperson and later became the first high priest of Israel. Their involvement illustrates the importance of family and community in fulfilling one's divine mission. Leaders are often supported by those around them, and recognizing the contributions of others is vital for any leader's success. This aspect of Moses' story also teaches us about the value of teamwork and the collective effort required to achieve significant goals. While Moses was the appointed leader, the success of the Exodus and the survival of the Israelites in the wilderness depended on the combined efforts of many individuals. This reminds us that no leader operates in isolation, and the strength of a community lies in its ability to work together toward a common purpose. Endurance through trials and perseverance. The 40 years that Moses and the Israelites spent in the wilderness is a powerful metaphor for enduring trials and persevering through hardships. The Israelites faced hunger, thirst, and the uncertainty of a long journey through a harsh environment. Moses, as their leader, bore the brunt of their frustrations and complaints, yet he continued to lead them with patience and faith. This period of wandering was not just a physical journey but a spiritual one, where the Israelites were tested and refined. Moses' endurance during these years is a lesson in the importance of perseverance. Challenges and setbacks are inevitable, but how we respond to them defines our character and our ultimate success. Moses' story teaches us that perseverance is not just about enduring hardships, but doing so with faith and trust that the journey has a purpose, even if it is not immediately clear. The legacy of faithfulness. Finally, the life of Moses is a testament to the lasting legacy of faithfulness. Moses did not live to enter the Promised Land, but his faithfulness to God's mission ensured that the Israelites did. His legacy was not in the physical land he never entered, but in the spiritual inheritance he left behind, a people set apart for God, governed by divine law, and guided by a covenant relationship with the Creator. Moses' story reminds us that our actions and faithfulness can have a lasting impact beyond our lifetimes. We may not see the full fruits of our labors, but our commitment to our values and our mission can influence generations to come. This is the ultimate lesson from Moses' life, that faithfulness to a higher calling, even in the face of great challenges, is the true measure of a life well lived. Remember to subscribe to our channel if you found this content valuable. We'll see you in the next one.